Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 627. Today we're going to take a look at Root, and this is a new game from Leder Games designed by Cole Wehrle, who's done some of the popular PAX card games, which I've not played of any of those. Oh, well, that's a lie. I tried one and didn't really care for it, but anyway, so this is designed by Cole. I do care for this. So this is a very interesting kind of game. It's super unique. I've not really played a game quite like this. I'll talk more about that in the review. But what players are doing is you're taking over sort of like an animal tribe. So one player will be the cats, and one player will be the birds, and one player will be the vagabond, which is just a single raccoon, and not really a tribe, it's just the one character. And then the other one is sort of like a bunch of mice and rats and things. So you're trying to control sort of this kingdom. In this case, it's just a forest, and you're trying to control that and win and get the most points, but everybody gets points in a completely different way. So let's just jump down and talk about how it works. I'm not going to go over the rules in excruciating detail, or very much detail at all, frankly, because this has a little bit of a barrier to learn. Like I said, each of the different 4 factions that come in this box, and I think there's 3 more factions in the expansion, plays really differently. It's like almost playing in their own little game. So that is a little bit of a barrier to entry. They do take some steps towards alleviating that barrier, but I'll talk more about that in the review. So let's jump in and take a quick look at how everything kind of works and how it looks. Okay, so here's the board. I've not done any of the setup for the game, but there's just a couple of quick concepts I want you to know. There really are 2 core basic concepts to how the game's going to work and what all of the different factions have in common, and then you're going to branch off and play your own kind of game. So the first thing to kind of notice here, let's zoom in on one of these areas. Okay, you can see this area here, and there's these different paths that are leading to other areas. So as you sort of put your little characters out, and you can see these are the little cat pieces here. You might have some birds in there and some other different faction pieces. You might also have some buildings. So here the cats might have built a recruitment building, which means they can take turns to later activate and recruit more cat pieces. And these are really cool because, as you maybe can see, they have little drawings on these meeples to make them look like cats and birds. And then maybe the bird player puts a roost in there, and all the factions have different kinds of buildings. So you can see there's only 2 spots in this particular spot for buildings. And then some of these, you can see these have R's. You're going to cover these up, and then it's possible that the vagabond might dig and uncover those, or if you're not playing with the vagabond, those will just stay covered up. But then you can also make movement to some of these other areas. And you can see here, if you look, this one has a little symbol of a mouse there, and then this one has, a fox there. And so what that's going to tell you is what kind of cards you can play to activate. So you can see there's a fox card. And then let's find a little mouse card, there. And then the other thing you can notice here is these bird cards are going to act most of the time as like a wild. So if I want to do something, spot or activate an area, I've got to play and discard a card that matches that. Now the other thing you can do with these cards is you can build them. You can see this one has 2 foxes, and then you can build this, and it says, in battle, as attacker may deal an extra hit, but defender scores 1 point. So I can build this here as a brutal tactics, but what I'm going to need is control over 2 of these fox areas. So you can see this one here and then this one there. But everybody kind of builds stuff in a different way, but that's just a general core concept of you're going to be building buildings, possibly. Not everybody builds buildings, but you could build buildings, and then you could move from place to place here. And then you can use these cards to either kind of build them or score points with them. Like this one here, you can see you can play this and activate a rabbit space. So if we move down here, there's a rabbit space. And then if we want to build it, we're going to need to control a mouse spot, and we can do it. And then instead of actually leaving this in front of us, you're going to get a little token, which is only going to matter really for the vagabond. Sometimes it matters in other ways, but you're also going to get a point, and then it says immediately discard it. So sometimes you'll build them for points. Sometimes you'll build these for a special ability. Now the object of the game is to play it, and so you get your control marker up here all the way to 30 points, but everybody's going to score points in a completely different way. So here, for example, is the board that the cat player will start with, and they will have these different building tokens on the board to start the game. And then as you build them, you can see you're going to start to uncover these and score more and more points or get extra cards in your hand. Typically, you have a hand limit of 3 cards, but this can go up and increase for the cat anyway by building more of these recruitment buildings. If you build the sawmills, that's going to generate more wood, and then you're going to have, be able to generate more wood at the start of your turn. Because one of the things that happens here at the start of your turn as the cat is in the bird song phase, you're going to place 1 wood at each sawmill. So that's the cat thing. Nobody else has that. But everybody has a bird song, which is kind of like a pre-turn, and then a daylight, which is where you're going to take actions, and then you're going to have an evening phase, which is sort of like some cleanup. Now, you all have like special abilities and stuff like that. The cat has a keep, or they kind of start off with. The bird player, instead of taking actions like the cat player was, you get 3 actions, you take different actions, they're going to be playing cards out here above their board. You can see recruit, move, battle, build, and you're going to start the game with some of these spots filled in here like so. So what this means is, let's say I just had this out here. So I'm going to go into my recruit, move, battle, and build. I'm not going to do anything in battle and build, but in recruit I can recruit anywhere because this is a wild, again, it's a bird card. But then I have to move from a matching clearance. I got to move from a rabbit spot to an adjacent spot and so on. So you have to do this. Now, if you can't do this as the bird player, you're going to go into what's called turmoil down here, and you're going to have to discard a bunch of cards, lose some points for the bird cards up here, swap out your leader. They also have special leader cards. They have these leader cards. These are only for the bird cards. So this guy has an eerie leader. So as attacker in a battle, you deal an extra hit. But if you go into turmoil, then you have to switch leaders out. And now you get another special ability. Ignore your disdain for trade when you craft. And what that means is sometimes when you craft the items that I showed you, it'll give you more than a point. These guys are capped at 1 point, so they don't really care about building. And then you've got, let's look at the Woodland Alliance. These are like the little critters of just different, like mice and rats or whatever. They behave like rats, so I keep calling them rats. They're not really rats. And so they spread out in a completely different way, and they're going to put out the sympathy tokens off the bottom of their board here. As they spread that, as people move into the areas where they're at, as they do battle with them in areas, then they're going to actually have to start giving them these cards here. So that's an interesting kind of thing. Because these guys really don't do very much. They kind of just spread around and kind of annoy people and then collect cards, and then all of a sudden they're doing really cool things and then they win the game. Not theoretically. I'm not saying they're broken. I'm just saying that's kind of their plan. And then last one here is the Vagabond player, and he just has the one raccoon token that he moves around. And he just has the one guy. He's not really trying to spread his army. He is actually trading, and some of these craft goods that you can build, you're going to take, you can see this particular token here, and then this guy's going to come and just basically take that from you. And then he gets sort of built up, and he can do combat and spend some of the tokens, and those will do different things. He can go on quests. He can then repair his weapons and stuff that he gets to use. But he pretty much is kind of acting like everybody's friends and scoring points during the course of the game. But then he can become hostile, and you can no longer be friendly with them, and he's going to get points for removing those characters in battle. So he's kind of wandering around, sort of picking stuff off, and just kind of being a harasser in general as well. So that's really just kind of the basics of the game. To dive in and really kind of go through the interplay of the cards and how the different factions work, that's like a 45-minute video right there. So the one thing that I mentioned at the beginning was they do take some steps to sort of walk you through it. So they have setup on the back of these. So this is kind of your general setup. But you also get cards here. Now this one is for, let's see, this is for the cats here. And so they'll give you some basic things to set up. So this is if you're going to do the walkthrough. And it'll show you a picture of your faction board and what that should look like. They have this for each of the factions. And then you can go through this 2-turn walkthrough. You just play through it exactly as this. So the cat player will go first, and they're going to read this. And then the next player is Eerie Alliance, and then the Vagabond. So everybody kind of read out loud, say what they're doing, and then everybody will go through turn 2, and then it kind of leaves off from there. Now that's a good kind of way to dunk you in the game. A little spoiler for the review. I would like to see something a little bit different. Maybe in addition to that, which I'll explain it into the review. But that's kind of the general summary. I'm sorry that's kind of all over the place, but you get kind of a general feel for the game. Everybody's playing very differently. This one, you're controlling one character. You're moving around, you're making trades. You're kind of doing sort of guerrilla hit and run combat, if you will. This one is you're sort of spreading. You're just kind of being an annoyance, collecting cards and that kind of thing, and then spring like these little bombs. You get these kind of little bases and stuff, but you don't really have a direct like my army versus your army kind of thing. That's where these first two factions come in. The birds are sort of spreading out. They're doing this sort of robo-rally programming kind of thing, and they are trying to set it up and really sort of plan their turn out long term and try to avoid going into turmoil. So there's that. And then the cats are sort of your more straightforward, like, I'm going to do this. I get some wood. I can build buildings with my wood. I can do 3 actions: battle, march, recruit, build, overwork, etc. So this is sort of your most straightforward faction. I would say be the cats. And then probably these, because it's just a little bit of robo-rally. So your turn's a little bit on rails at the beginning, which is okay as you get going. And then you can start to see where you might kind of hang yourself a little bit. But that's a real general overview of the game. No, it's not. I forgot one other thing I was going to talk about, and that's combat. It's very simple. Let's just use an example here. We've got, let's say, 1 bird over here, and then maybe we've got 3 cats. And then as an action, the cat's going to initiate combat there against the bird. So we're going to roll the dice. Let's say we got that. Let's say we got a better example like that. So as the attacker, you're always going to choose the highest number, and then the defender is always going to choose the lowest number. You're going to do that many hits to the opposite side. Since the cat initiated the attack, they're going to do 3 hits. That will obviously remove the bird, because there's only 1 bird there. The bird could do 2 hits back, but you're capped at the number of little warrior tokens you have. So even if this bird rolls higher than a 1, he's only ever going to do 1 back. So in this case, the result of this combat would be the 3 hits obviously remove that, and then he's still only got the 1 hit coming back there. So these would be left. Now if you have cardboard on the table, then let's say we had cleared out the cats like that, and the bird had initiated the combat, and they had another bird in here, and it was like this. So it was the same roll. And so the cat obviously can only do 1 back because it's just got the 1 warrior. These 2 can go there. So the first thing to be removed will be the wooden cat warrior. And then the next one will be to remove some cardboard. Whenever you remove cardboard, you're going to get a victory point as well, and that's a universal rule there. So that's combat. I forgot to cover that. It's a pretty basic core concept that is pretty much the same for everybody. You will get little modifiers and things like that. Okay, so that was Root. What do I think of the game, and what are my 3 sort of ideas on the pillars of reviews that I've been doing? So the first thing is, let's say, playtime. I would say this is rough because I was taught the game. I tried to read the rules. And let me tangent on the rules a little bit, because I mentioned that at the end of the walkthrough. Now the rules are good. There's a nice like rules reference if you need to go and refer to something, and the rules are not really complicated at all. But as terms of like me trying to digest it for rules teach, and then trying to explain the basic core stuff like I did with movement and combat and all that stuff, and then kind of individually teach each player what their faction does and the mechanics, because the mechanics are so different. It's tough. I mean, it's a barrier. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that as a negative. I do have one like kind of nitpick or suggestion, which is pointless and people can ignore it if they were involved with this game for sure. That's just my kind of personal thing. So that's a huge barrier though to get the game played, and I think that's something people should be aware of. Now I was taught it by somebody that had already played it, and so from my perspective, I think most games have like what you call a learning game, when you got to play the game once, learn it, and go, okay, now I kind of know what to do. This one is like the best example of a learning game that you would need to do, because the rules walkthrough thing is really cool. You get the first 2 turns, you go, okay, I can do this, this, and this, and then the cards and stuff are going to kind of inform my game as I progress, and then kind of watching what the other players are doing. But really, you're not going to know like what the other players are going to get up to. Everybody's going to be kind of in their own silo, and it's not multiplayer solitaire, but that first play is going to feel like that, because if I'm the cat, I'm not really concerned with the raccoon. So it's just a tough thing to get into. But having been taught, having gone through a learning game and then playing it again, and then kind of having a loose understanding of myself and like one other faction, then you kind of start to learn the other stuff. So it's got that kind of slow roll. But here's the thing, I think you're going to be rewarded at the end of that for sure. But you just got to know you're going to have to grind through, I think, 2 full games and really play them with the attitude of not, I'm going to try to play this and win it, but let me try to play it and then also understand what you're going through and what you're doing. And hey, let's work this scenario out. Okay, if you do that. So if everybody has that kind of collective attitude of helping each other learn the game, I think the game's going to go fine. It's going to go smoothly. So just kind of know that going up front. You're just not going to sit down, bang, bang, I'm going to play, I'm going to try to win, all that. That's not going to work. The one thing I wish that they did, and it's just this for me, because this really reminds me of, let me put a pin in the playtime. I'd say 1.5 to 2.5 hours, depending on how many times you played the game and how many players and all that stuff. So it's in the ballpark of like a normal board game. But it's really going to vary and stuff, and the end game could really sneak up on you, and you can have a quick game. But that's just kind of a ballpark thing. Now, the one thing I was going to talk about that I wish they had with the rules is it reminds me, and this is sort of the other part of my review thing, is what game does it remind me of? It reminds me of a coin game like Cuba Libre or Andean Abyss or something like that, where you have 4 relatively distinct factions that are playing different games. You're getting points in different ways. You're using different mechanics. Now, this is even more divergent in terms of the mechanics than those games. Those games, most of the factions will have sort of a common recruit, build a base kind of thing. They have different things like that. And you have special effect cards that you can interact with. Now, this is like completely different games. I'm building an army and an engine. You're building a flock of birds using Robo Rally. This other person is just being annoying because they're a bunch of creatures. And then you have the one guy that's just controlling the one raccoon. And that's it. You just move around harassing people. So I wish, though, to kind of tie that back to the coin thing, I wish that they would do something that GMT does with their games, which has helped me with the coin games, which are similar, but they're also a lot more complex than this game, where they give you not just like 2-turn walkthroughs, they give you like several turns and they kind of narrate it. And they say, Billy's doing this because in the later turn, he's going to want to do that. And that's going to happen because of this. And it is a legitimate like prose conversational kind of thing. This one says the one rule book is conversational, and I don't really find it conversational. It's just slightly less bullet pointed than the rules reference, which is fine. But when I think conversational, I'm thinking like you're also like getting into my head explaining things. But so I wish it would kind of do that, where you could say, walk through like 8 turns or something, and then really describe it and say, the bird player is now going to do this because they know da-da-da-da. And you're like, okay, cool. I see what he's thinking. So you can do that. And you can read that in like a half an hour. And then you can go back to the bullet pointed review or rules and then kind of walk through and go. And then everything's going to click. Because here, man, I'm just really bagging on the game, but I really like it. Here it's like the cats do this. And I'm like, why would cats do this? And then it's like the birds do that. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of feels like birds, but I don't really know what birds are thinking. In the raccoon, yeah, that feels like kind of a raccoon thing. But it doesn't have that grounding in reality that like a coin game would, where I'm like, oh, this is the drug dealer guys. These are the guys that are going to be dealing drugs. They're in crime, okay? And, here's the government. The government has this point of view. So I can kind of go at it with that. Oh, that makes sense. I want to build that, fortify that, or sneak in here and do a sabotage. And, so I can kind of get into it a little bit there. All right, enough banging on the game here. I really do enjoy the game. It's a very unique breath of fresh air. All of the different mechanics that you use for each of the different factions, they play completely differently. And you've got to kind of know all the factions if you want to play your faction effectively. And I like that because it makes you feel like you have a personality. And you've got the kind of the anthropomorphic, cats and birds as sort of intelligent, hyper-intelligent beings. And so that's cool because it feels like your team there has a personality, and in contrast to other players' personalities and the characters and the flavors of that. So in a way, even though the fantasy part of this, of the cats and things organizing and all that, it doesn't really make a whole lot of realistic sense in terms of the theme of it. It all kind of fits. Like it feels like it's building up a little world here, and that's really cool. And the funny thing is, it's getting accomplished here without like really almost no narrative per se, other than you play these mechanics, and I play these completely different mechanics, and then somehow that makes a narrative. So that's just really awesome. So that's kind of my nutshell of a review there. Is it's like a smorgasbord of games all thrown into one game, and then somehow the theme pops out. You know, that's pretty crazy. So if you can get through and come in it with the attitude, and to me that's more of what I'm trying to say. It's more of a warning than like don't play this game because of that. It's like, hey, come into it with I think this kind of attitude of I'm not going to get this game, and not everybody at the table necessarily is going to get the game until we kind of work through it. You might know like, oh, well, I can build buildings because I'm the cat. Great, but that's not really knowing how to play the game. That's just knowing how to do a script, go through a procedure. Playing a game is engaging and kind of knowing why you're doing things and stuff like that. Not I put a cube or a cardboard token on the thing. That's not the game. That's not knowing how to play the game. That's just knowing how to push crap around the table. Give yourself a play or two, and then you can know, and then you can start to engage the other side of your brain, the creative thinking outside the box, trying to be sneaky and wily and get around Billy and his crafty plans because he's playing that stupid raccoon again. That kind of stuff. So that is Root. Definitely recommend. I think if you got a group that's going to bite the bullet and get through it, then I think you're going to not regret having given this hopefully several plays. So thanks.